Welcome to another edition of RotoWire TV. Instead of Chris Liss today, you get Derek VanRiper. You get a little upgrade for this week. We're thankful for that. Liss is slaving away at the football magazine. He's actually showing some signs of optimism, so he must be close to being done. But Derek, thanks for joining us today. You just had a good trip to Miller Park to their press box this time, hanging out with RotoWire's Bernie Pleskoff.
Yeah, I had a good time. Got to record an episode of Short Hops with Bernie, so that was nice to get that opportunity. A lot different watching games in person, and it's even a little more different watching them in the press box because it's easier to stay focused up there. Everybody in the press box closely, but if you're watching it with a group of friends or the people around you are spilling drinks and doing that kind of stuff, it's easy to get distracted. I go with my wife. She wants to go get something to eat, and I miss an inning here and there, so just a nice experience overall. A first-class facility as Miller Park has been ever since they built it, but the whole staff there is just fantastic.
Yeah, and you actually got credentialed, so way to go, fantasy industry. Hey, point for us there, too. So, okay, let's look at some of the observations from this game. Nelson Cruz is going crazy. We do our overall cheat sheet feedback, and I was responsible for 1 through 100 a day. And we had him down in the low 80s, and I thought, okay, got to move him up farther. If you're drafting a day, how early are you taking Nelson Cruz?
Probably somewhere in the 50 to 75 range. I think the big thing now is that he doesn't try to steal bases anymore, and I think that may have been a big source of the leg injuries that he dealt with for a good chunk of his career. So I'm hopeful that maybe this will be that year we get something closer to 160 games from him. Baltimore is a great place to hit, as we know. The issue last night, Yovani Gallardo was throwing pitches to him that were still catching the middle third of the plate. He was just missing badly. The second home run in particular, fastball right down the pike. There's just no way you can pitch Nelson Cruz there. He's got that stance, too, the wide-open stance. I think if you go down and away and you execute, you can get him out that way. But he's been hitting opposite field home runs this year, Jeff. That's what's really impressing me the most.
Yeah, and it's funny. He's one of the biogenesis guys. Ryan Braun, one of the biogenesis guys, both having pretty good years. Well, Braun, it's been all over the map. He's had the injuries, but he stole his fourth base. He's hit sort of power and flurries. All but Everett Cabrera, though, those that have been tainted with that, have actually had pretty decent years. Actually, Yasmani Grandal hasn't had a great season either. But I wonder, how much of an impact is it? Is it that it's out of their system? Is it linger in their system longer? What was it they're taking? We still have no answers on these things.
For me, I mean, if I'm looking at the way I think the PEDs are applied here, it's really just that any gains you might have on PEDs would be sustained with strength training. So in that sense, in your system makes some sense. But realistically, I mean, they're all good players to begin with. And I think that's the key is that, I mean, I guess you don't know where Everett Cabrera's baseline was, but he's the guy that is struggling the most. With Peralta, it's a long track record. With Nelson Cruz, it's a pretty long track record going back to his late 20s. With Braun, very good track record across the board since really his first season in the big leagues. With Braun, he's not showing that pull power that we're accustomed to. He's going opposite field. Both of his hits last night went that way. I don't know if we're going to see 25, 30 home run power from him this year because of the thumb injury and because of the oblique, but it was a really good sign to see him get that stolen base in particular. If he can still bring 15 or 20 steals and drive in lots of runs, they moved to the number 2 spot in the order. We keep seeing teams move their elite hitter into that role. It seems like that's something Ron Renicki's going to stick with.
I hope so. I hope this is a trend that sticks. Joey Votto did it for a while, though. Before he went on the DL, he was back to hitting fourth. I think they're just trying to, shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, though. I think that was the case there. The Reds they're beyond repair right now. But then we saw Evan Longoria hitting second for the Rays. Yeah, this is a growing trend. One of the good stories coming out of Milwaukee this year, at least until the last couple of weeks, has been Francisco Rodriguez. K-Rod, though, blew a save on Monday. Seems like he's kind of slowing down quite a bit. Slowing down might be the operative word. He never was really throwing that hard this year. He was 89, even when he was doing it at his peak earlier this season.
A lot of sliders, a lot of changeups, really staying down and away from hitters. That's what's made K-Rod so effective. Even though he pitched on 3 consecutive days entering Wednesday's game, he was up warming up twice in that game. There was a point where the bottom of the 8th inning, he was up. Chris Davis hit a 3-run home run. It put the Brewers up 5, took away the save situation. He sat down. Zach Duke came in to try to finish off the game. Orioles got a couple of runners on base, and suddenly K-Rod was throwing again. Brewers had an off day on Thursday, very well timed, but it really seems like unless Ron Renicky comes out and says specifically that K-Rod's not available, they're just going to use him as often as they possibly can. He's a veteran player on a one-year deal, so they don't have that long-term incentive to really worry about his health.
I think that's a great point. Just use and release. I think that's clearly what they're doing there. What else grabbed you from this game before we move on to the all-jigsaw team?
Will Smith has been outstanding for the Brewers all year. You talk about that minor trade, Nori Aoki going to Kansas City. Doug Melvin really found himself a quality left-hander. He came in, kind of clean up Brandon Kinsler's mess, struck out Chris Davis, struck out the side also in the 8th inning. I think he might have been the candidate to come in and get the save had Chris Davis not been at the plate in the 7th. I think matchups may have steered Renicky to go ahead and use Smith there instead of trying to save him for the 9th. I was a little surprised that Tyler Thornburg didn't get up. Defensively, Manny Machado looked a little bit stiff, had a ground ball hit his way, didn't really charge at it the way you'd expect him to, but as someone that hasn't watched Machado play each and every day this season, I don't know if that's like atypical. It's just something to keep a close eye on. He's really struggled at the plate so far. Chris Davis from the Orioles, just since we got Chris Davis on both sides, really was getting fooled. It seemed like he was just swinging off his heels a little bit, kind of pulling off the ball, just didn't look like himself. Could have been a function of flying across the country. I know he was on the paternity list Sunday and Monday, so maybe he's a little bit rusty just from the time off and the extra travel. So it looks like he might still be a little ways away from kind of breaking out of the early season struggles we've seen from him.
Yeah, and remember, he came back a little bit ahead of schedule from his oblique injury. Remember, at one point they were saying 6 weeks, and it didn't last nearly that long. So that's possible, too, that, and then he had the DL trip, came back, then he had the paternity leave. His timing could be off a little bit. Just might not just be completely in sync. Interesting. Would you call him an interesting buy low? What sort of price would you put on Chris Davis, the Oriole, right now?
I'm a little scared because the numbers in the second half last year look a lot like the numbers he had in 2012, and that's kind of what he's done this year. Maybe that's more the baseline, that 240, 250 on base, and plenty of power. And that's still an extremely valuable player, but that's not a top 20 player. So I'd probably give him a slight downgrade right now because of the health concerns. The oblique, as you mentioned, could really still be a factor. Maybe kind of the 30 to 35 range, and I don't know if I'd get him there. I don't know if other people out there are downgrading him quite that much, but just based on what I've seen so far, I have to think that 2012 and second half 2013 line is more along the lines of what Davis is going to give us.
All right, very good. Let's talk about a couple puzzlers, guys that we've had a hard time trying to figure out what they're all about, positive and negative. We'll start with the positive one. Melky Cabrera, having a great start to the season. Another guy tainted by the Biogenesis bat. But, hey, hitting well, hitting at the top of that Jays order, hitting .314 right now, 8 homers, 4 stolen bases, lots of counting stats, 35 runs scored. Hey, I thought that last year I had him. I thought that maybe the correction on him was not going to be as severe as it was. Of course, this year, this is when you really, truly could buy low, and I didn't.
I'm in the same boat. I think last year there was a point we did a top 350 overall. Melky was in my top 50. He was at the back end of the top 50. You didn't even draft him that early last year, and that was coming off of a much better season. I look at him right now and think that maybe he is that top 50 player once again. All the things we would have liked about him going into his first season with the Blue Jays are still there. This is a lineup that can put a ton of runs on the board. Obviously, Jose Bautista having a nice bounce back year as he's healthy. Edwin Encarnacion has just been crushing the ball in May. Jose Reyes being healthy also helps create some RBI chances for Melky. I think it's legit. I think he's definitely one of those buy high guys as we move through the end of May.
Top 100 player, top 75 player. Where's it stop?
Probably 75. I mean, I think the knee issues he had last year, they seemed like they were directly related to that benign tumor that he had removed. But playing on that surface in particular when you've had knee issues is a little bit problematic. But top 75 right now and still rising.
You're looking for an outfielder to trade for. Do you go after Melky Cabrera or do you go after Matt Holliday?
Probably going after Matt Holliday based on the track record there. I think he's still going to find a way to get the 25 homers, the 100 RBIs. Those are just pretty standard numbers for Holliday. I think that Cardinals lineup, it's been one of the bigger disappointments this year if you're looking for run production. They're going to turn things around here as the weather gets warmer. Colton Wong's been hitting a lot better since he was demoted to AAA, so his return has gone much more like what the Cardinals had probably pictured from him as an everyday player. I think he had another 4-hit game on Wednesday night. So I look at the Cardinals as a kind of a buy low across the board right now. There's some guys there that I don't expect to get back to levels that they might have had previously. Alan Craig's sort of one of them. Definitely a puzzling player for me. Might be cheap enough some places where you can actually get a bargain, but I think he's just more of a 300 hitter, 15, 18 home runs, more like a Billy Butler type player than people realize.
Right. Maybe so. And that's the positives and negatives that go with Billy Butler. And maybe defensively he might end up being like them. I've seen him butcher a few plays in right field. Ties into a bigger question with the Cardinals. What do they do with Oscar Taveras? When is he coming up?
I feel like it's coming up soon. I feel like it might be mid-June, especially if the offense continues to scuffle. And I think Matt Adams is the guy that's going to get squeezed the most because of it. And they showed last season they're willing to make him more of a part-time player. Injuries could also be a factor. Craig's had a hard time staying healthy throughout his career. Holiday now in his 30s obviously could be more of an injury risk. And there's a few different ways it could work out. I know the Cardinals really valued the defense Peter Burgos brings in center field. So I just think one way or another, there are enough paths where one of them will open up for Taveras. And once the Super 2 considerations can be pushed aside or likely pushed aside, since that's a projected thing rather than like a locked-in sort of date, I think we'll see Taveras probably by the end of June.
Yeah, and I know there's some buzz about him coming up for the Cardinals' 7-game interleague road trip, so they 7 AL games, so they can have the DH available. Be interested to see if they call him up for that and he rakes and they keep him up after that. That's kind of the scenario where I could see happening. Or it might just be, okay, screw it, we're going to send him back down now that interleague stretch is over. Curious to see how the Cardinals handle that one. Looking at a couple other more Jigsaw guys, couple more that I've personally had a hard time figuring out too. One has to be, is Curtis Granderson. How I thought he was a great, buy low and overcorrection. Oh, he's out of Yankee Stadium. Now he's hit better in the last month. Is that more indicative of what we're going to see, or is where he's at overall right now, is that more his baseline? What's his baseline?
I think his baseline is probably 230, 25 to 30 home runs, and a decent number of runs driven in. The Mets lineup is another one that's underperformed across the board. I mean, David Wright through 2 months hasn't been anything close to the player many people expected. The Mets don't have a prototypical table setter in the leadoff spot. They do have Daniel Murphy. He's been their best offensive player, I would say, to this point in terms of living up to the projections. But Granderson, to me, I look back at those numbers, like we talked about it on XM, his home run splits aren't as pronounced as you would have expected looking back at what he did at Yankee Stadium. It definitely helped him, but it did not completely make him. So I think 25 to 30 home runs over a full season is still something he's capable of. But it's going to come with a low average, and as he continues to age, that stolen base count's likely going to continue to fall.
All right, very good. Carlos Santana, a guy I have in a couple of places, including Tout Wars and Labor, goes on the concussion list, the 7-day concussion list. Unfortunately, it's after deadline, roster deadlines this week, so you're left with a full week without that spot empty. Now, granted, it's a catcher spot. Rarely are you going to find anything better than the likes of Brian Pena or anything like that to replace him. But are you trying to target him in buy low talks? What is wrong with Carlos Santana right now?
On spec alone, I think you have to. It just doesn't make any sense. You look at the numbers, and there's not a whole lot there that points to a clear explanation. He hasn't completely changed his approach to play. He still draws a share of walks. The average is low. The on-base percentage is still reasonably high for someone hitting in the 150 range. Has the concussion though right now. Could be a perfect time to buy low because in addition to the slump, he's obviously hurt. So maybe you just go after him on spec. I haven't heard anyone else with a good explanation though either. Even people that watch this team play every day. It's puzzling. There were no warning signs late last season. Nothing in the second half, nothing in September, nothing that would made you think that something was wrong. Maybe he's been playing with some kind of undisclosed injury. Maybe the move to third base has really been messing with him. Just the extra defensive responsibilities, the extra time he's putting in there is taking away his time preparing as a hitter. I'm stumped on Santana.
Yeah, I am too. The fact is they keep on moving him to multiple positions too. I think if they move to just one position and just leave him there, would be better off than having him catch. Well, obviously, he got concussed because he was catching. But sometimes at first base, sometimes at DH, sometimes at third base. The mix and match hasn't worked out so well with them. I'm curious to see how they handle when he comes back. I did buy low on a pitcher this week in AL Tout Wars, Derek. I actually sold high too. I had Gordon Beckham, who I bought for $5 in the auction. Sold him to Andy Behrens for Hiroki Kuroda, who he paid 15 for in the auction. My starting pitching is nearly tragic in that league, and I have a lot of depth in hitting. So, good trade, bad trade. What do you think about Kuroda? What do you think about Beckham?
I mean, I think Kuroda as a buy low is actually pretty intriguing. The home run rate's up. That's not a big surprise for someone who's possibly losing some skills in the twilight of his career, and given where he pitches, the Yankee Stadium ball just flies out of there. Otherwise, I think the control's still pretty good. He's a little bit more hittable than he used to be. At least he has been at this point. So maybe the baseline for the whip has gone up slightly. But Kuroda, for such a long time, has been one of those players that really couldn't hurt you. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him bounce back to his previous levels. Beckham, I like the fact the White Sox hit him high in the order. I think that gives them a chance to pile up a lot of runs scored, especially once they get Jose Abreu back into the fold. But I just don't see a major turnaround coming from him at any point. I think he's just sort of this good defender, below average stick, and until the White Sox grow tired of him by either trading him or finding a way to bench him, he's going to produce a little bit, at least in the league that deep.
Yeah, he's off to a pretty good start, I have to say. Hitting 297, 4 home runs since he came off the DL, slugging 445. It's an OBP league, so 338 OBP. Not bad, especially when you're looking as your middle infielder or you're desperate for playing time. Andy has had like all sorts of injuries, including Jurickson Profar, who clearly isn't coming back anytime soon. So see it from his angle too. We'll see how it works out. We've got a long way to go to catch Rick Wolf and Glenn Colton. They're off to like about 25-point lead on the field right now on that one. I'm in second, or was in second or third pretty much every day in that league. So we'll see what happens with that. Derek, get to know your video host. All right. So what's it like watching a game with Bernie Pleskoff in the press box?
It's awesome because he sees things that I just don't even think about. He watches the game with a stopwatch too, so he's sitting there, he's timing everything. He's timing runners to first base. He's timing pitchers to home plate. As soon as he watched Norris throw a few pitches, he had Norris slow to home plate. Not surprisingly, Braun and Gomez both ran on him soon after that. That's one of those things too. I got excited about it. I was tweeting about it as it happened, and our buddy Corey Schwartz at MLB actually said next year they are going to have a database available of those types of metrics, because there are very few people out there that actually even take the time to record them in the first place. But if you knew going into a week or even just a daily game in particular that there's a pitcher that's particularly slow to home plate and he's pitching in a very hitter-friendly environment, the speedy players in that team become much more likely to pick up steals. There's all sorts of little advantages you can get from that. But Bernie's a wealth of information. Always enjoy watching games with him. Always learn something, it seems like, every time I go to the park with him.
What's the choice of the press box food for the two of you?
For me, I actually didn't have anything in the press box. I just brought a Cliff Bar. I think they had some chicken parmesan for Bernie yesterday, so he actually had a chance to eat some of that.
All right. Very good. Very good. Favorite ballpark food, period, for you?
Favorite ballpark food? There actually is a brisket parfait at Miller Park, and I think right now that's the current title holder. I had some pretty good Kremarchuk sausage at Target Field. That's pretty high up on the list. I think you can get Primanti's inside the park at PNC. I actually had it in downtown Pittsburgh and then crossed the Clinton Bridge. That's probably the bronze medalist for me. It's definitely worth trying. Don't overhype the Primanti. It's good. It's not going to change your life, but it's definitely worth trying.
All right, very good. All right, you've been watching another edition of RotoWire TV. Derek VanRiper, thanks for doing this today, Derek. Liss will probably be back next week unless he's decided to walk the earth. Always a possibility with him. Stay tuned. Thanks again for watching. Thanks, Derek.
Yep, thanks, Jeff. Good luck with Liss.